and although it may, so commissioners have been able to view that. Now we'll jump to the roll call really quick, facilitated by staff.
Commissioners, when I call your name, please indicate you're here. Jeffrey Barrett,
Yes.
Amy Burrows,
Yes.
Landon Krasik,
Here.
Richard Leverett,
Here.
Brian Scott,
Here.
Michael Vela.
Here.
Thank you. We do have a quorum, and our city attorney will be joining us through Zoom this evening.
Thank you very much. Now is time for the report of the chair and the vice chair. Starting with the report of the chair, I just want to give a huge thanks to Commissioner Burrows for a year of being an incredible chair and I've seen her put a lot of extra time in to make sure that meetings went smoothly. And so just a big thanks to her for all that she did this last year. So thanks. Now to the report of the vice chair.
I have nothing to report.
Thank you. Okay, so now to the report of the director.
The only thing I have to report since you've met last is that you recall a development agreement associated with the Delta Center and a parking garage that has been finalized and fully executed. So, I mean, if you go by, you see that parking garage under construction at the moment. So just want to update the commission on that. We haven't had much in the form of items on the council since you last met, so we don't have any other updates on ongoing items pending city council yet.
Thank you. Now we are going to open up our open forum. This is a moment for commissioners to discuss planning, zoning, and general land use items that are not listed on the agenda. There is no public comment associated with this item. The discussion should last no longer than 10 minutes. Are there any commissioners that have any items to discuss not on the agenda?
I wanted to ask if there's an update to the rule that we passed to City Council limiting extensions, if there's been a hearing on that or if they've weighed in or voted on it or anything.
So they haven't. In fact, we've actually held that transmittal because there's going to be pending legislation at the state this year addressing that exact same thing. So we wanted to make sure that we have an understanding of what's going to be proposed by the legislature, so that we're not adopting something and then instantly within months having to redo it. So
I had one item. I wasn't at the last meeting. I was still recouping from knee replacement, but I listened last time. And my only comment was I could hear all of the commissioners pretty well. I could not hear people that were presenting. It was on and off. It was very difficult. So for the people online, that just a statement.
Okay.
Apparently there was something unplugged somewhere. So that's why I couldn't hear either. And I was asking you to,
Yeah.
I was asking the commission to repeat. Sorry.
No problem. It's just.
Okay. So that was a temporary problem, potentially. Okay. Thank you for bringing that up, Commissioner Vela. Any other thoughts? Okay, let's move on to the consent agenda. So items on the consent agenda are expected to require little discussion. And we have 2 items today. Neither of them have a public hearing associated with them. The first consent agenda item is an extension request for the design review and plan development for Luso 2 Apartments 57 North, 1000 West. The second item is approval of the meeting minutes for September 10th. I would look for a motion on the consent agenda.
I'd make a motion to approve the items on the consent agenda.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Let's jump to voting. Okay, Commissioner Burrows.
Yes.
Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
Commissioner Leverett.
Yes.
Commissioner Barrett.
Yes.
Commissioner Vela.
Yes.
And I will also vote yes. So the consent agenda is approved unanimously. Now we will move over to other items. We had a discussion last time about the rules and ordinances by which the commission functions. This is a moment where we can kind of finish up and potentially vote on that discussion pending the commission's acceptance. So we'll turn it over to Michaela to continue that discussion.
So excited to talk about policies and procedures. I just had a short memo. We're looking for hopefully some action from the commission to adopt these tonight, unless you have further guidance or edits than what you provided at the last meeting. At the end of my memo, I had made notes on some guidance that you had provided, and I highlighted those changes in yellow. And hopefully they're satisfactory and addressed everything that the commission directed us to do. One thing was encouraging some sort of discussion with planning management, right? We could go through every sort of ex parte scenario or conflict of interest scenario. Well, we can't put all of those in the PMPs. So added in that if you think you have a conflict, call us. We're happy to discuss it. If we need attorney support, happy to do that. Yes, there was a comment about consolidating time, public testimony time, and I clarified that comment time cannot be transferred to another person. This is the same procedure as City Council and ensures consistent public comment procedures across city commissions and hearing bodies, and then clarified that a friendly amendment is accepted or rejected by the original motion maker. We don't need a second. And that failed substitute motions result in the original motion being back on the floor. And also striking, reconsidering a motion between the action taken at a meeting and when the minutes are adopted at the next meeting. And that was a directive from our attorney's office because we send out a record of decision. And so we have a code conflict if we did that. So I did go ahead and strike that. Happy to discuss if there are any other edits, comments, questions.
Let's just open it up to commissioners.
The one thing was, my recollection was that we were generally in favor of keeping the 5-minute for community organizations, but it looks like that's struck in here and it's just 2 minutes across the board.
I don't know if that was,
Is that?
I felt like it was kind of a 50-50. So if you want to discuss that and if that is what you would like, we can
Okay.
keep that in.
Do other commissioners have strong feelings about keeping the 5 minutes versus the 2?
Is there language about the discretion of the chair to extend
Yes.
in there?
That's in there.
Definite, okay, then I'm fine with it.
Okay. Great.
My only thing on it, I think that generally it's a good way to consolidate community interest and get it to us in a way that is much more concise and direct, as opposed to just and kind of organize. I think I think its service is as kind of an aggregator that does well for bringing us information. To have just a community council person come and say whatever their concern is for the larger group. And I may be misinterpreting, but if the idea is that then it's on the chair to grant that on a case-by-case basis with community council person, I think that's probably a bad way to go about it, because if they don't know that, they aren't going to come here with, they won't come here ready to do that. And I think that it's a valuable way that consolidates information and gets it to us. So that's all.
I tend to slightly agree with that perspective, but that is kind of where I stand on it.
I'll just make a comment that I've gone through this and it seems very clear. Michaela, like you said, you can't anticipate everything that's happening, but I think this is pretty clear. I particularly like the notion on 37 about substitute motions in the middle of a motion, that the initial motion pauses, the substitute happens. If the substitute then passes, then the original one goes away. I think that's pretty straightforward order for that to happen. So I appreciated that verbiage in there.
Great.
Thanks.
One thing that I noticed that wasn't in there, that was in the practice that we have been doing, is clarifying questions are not in here. And I can understand that that might be a discretion of the chair kind of a thing, but has other iterations of the commission felt like those clarifying questions immediately after a presentation before the public comment have been helpful, or does it mostly?
I mean, that is definitely the appropriate time for clarifying questions or factual questions
So
before
do
public
we-
testimony and
Do we want a section in here about clarifying questions to explicitly state that it's a time to make it happen?
what page are we on? Let's see. That is up to you all. If you would like that for clarification, great. You can add that in. Let me look.
It should be on page 13,
Thanks.
the top of 13. It should be like D.
Sure, I do that. Yeah, it could be after applicant presentation of the proposal. I could add that in. I think that's,
Do commissioners feel like it's a beneficial thing, or should we just delay all commission conversation until after public comment?
After public comment.
After public comment, says Vela.
I do think it's important, and I think Commissioner Burrows did a very good job about that, is that outlining what the procedures are, because there was a few meetings, I think, that the applicant, wanted to say something, but that wasn't their time. And I think maybe for some of those that are, the larger issues, that the audience and the applicants might be reminded of first this, then this, then this, that kind of thing. So it stays in its channels. So, because sometimes I think we got out of that.
Okay.
we can add that.
I think from an efficiency standpoint, though, we might need clarifying questions to help clarify things and keep the back and forth down after the fact. So I think it helps us get clarity before we go into our own session and comment. And that, otherwise, you'll have, 4 or 5 people, maybe someone sitting in the audience who has something to say or add to it, and they're back and forth trying to comment on what we're commenting because we didn't get something correct. Because we're now assuming that we had it right because we didn't give clarifying questions.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it would be good to have that still in there.
Okay. So far we have discussed
Well, so point.
clarifying. Oh, sorry.
Sorry. On top of that, though, I don't think we need language to say that.
Okay.
No.
You don't think we need language for it?
No. It's just after they comment, we have questions, we ask, and then we go into our regular session. It's a normal process. Yeah.
Yeah, we've been doing it that way.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, normally like the staff gives their presentation, the applicant gives their presentation, and then that's a moment to ask material factual questions like about process or any fact.
Sure.
No deliberation.
Okay. Okay, so we have discussed clarifying questions. My brain is going dead. You discussed the 5 minutes.
For RCO.
And one more thing was, no, I think
that was
and
it.
then
He
that,
just
it was
said
an
he liked.
appreciation. Okay, so is there a motion someone would like to make to include one of those or both of those? Or do we want to just vote on it as is?
I'd make a motion to add the 5 minutes for recognized organization. Should I do that? Should I make a motion?
I'll second.
Let's do.
Go.
Based on the information presented in discussion, I move the commission adopt the policies and procedures with the following modification. You know what I mean.
Thought you said it was
Where is it?
13.
Where is it? I turned the page. To allow for 5-minute comment period by the representative of a recognized community organization.
For consent and regular agenda, Commissioner Burrows?
Sure. Yeah.
Great. Thank you.
And then Commissioner Leverett, your second still stands?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we'll take a vote. Commissioner Avila,
Aye.
Commissioner Barrett,
Aye.
Commissioner Scott,
Yep.
Commissioner Burrows,
Yes.
Commissioner Leverett,
Yes.
and I will also vote yes. And that finishes our other business. Moving on to the regular agenda. Now we're here for what you guys are here for. So we will start with our first item of business is a text amendment adopting the Utah Wildland Urban Interface Fire Code. We will start with a presentation with the fire department and staff.
All right, I'm going to introduce this and then let representatives from the fire department get into more detail. But this, as mentioned, this is a text amendment that would adopt the state mandated wildland urban interface building code. This is intended to help reduce the wildfire risks and, as the fire department has explained to me, reduce risks of wildfires becoming building fires, which is a big thing, as we all know, and especially worldwide activities in the last year. It's an emergency response best practice, and then again, state code requires us to adopt this if we want to be reimbursed for fighting wildfires within the city limits. The WUI code basically are special building code provisions that regulate things like building materials and creating what's commonly called defensible space, which are landscaping regulations and building separation requirements like setbacks. This would be in Title 18, not the zoning code. The reason for that is because it's a building code. And under state code, building code regulations are considered land use regulations and require a recommendation from the Planning Commission. That's why it's here. And it only applies to specific properties. It's not a citywide application. So we're going to go over a couple of maps. Due to how broad this is and how big these areas are, we broke these up by planning communities so you could see where they apply. They mostly apply on the edges of where private property meets wildlands. And so starting with the Capitol Hill Community Plan area, most of this is extractive industry types of places. And then as you move down towards the bottom right of that map on the left, you start seeing on the area where it is mostly residential lands. And then similarly, moving over to the Avenues Community Plan, these are the upper reaches of development on the northern end of the Avenues community, wrapping around over towards the University of Utah. It's important to note that the University of Utah lands are not subject to the city's building and fire codes, but we have to map them under this law. So the East Bench Community Plan, we broke up into two areas just because the map was not readable otherwise. You can see on the left, these are mostly University of Utah properties, including Research Park and extending onto some state lands as well around. This is the Place Monument as we get closer to the mouth of Immigration Canyon. And then the map on the right is the Upper East Bench that shows where those boundaries, those properties that border the wildlands. Most of those lands are actually outside of the city limits. The city limit is those property lines, and those are mostly Forest Service lands. The bottom right, you can see the city boundary includes some unhighlighted lands. Those are actually mostly city-owned lands that have been dedicated as open space. And then we have two corridors within the more developed areas of the city that aren't on the edges. The portion of Immigration Creek and Red Butte Creek. You can see here Immigration Creek basically runs from what is Sunnyside Avenue down to the southwest along that corridor down towards 1500 East, and that's probably about 10 or 1100 south right there. And then the Red Butte Creek runs from what is essentially through Wasatch Hollow Park, just west of Clayton Middle School, and down through Allen Park at the very bottom left corner of that map. And that's the end of my presentation. I think the fire department, if you have questions or if you want to add any more detail to that, then we'll go from there.
Yeah, I'm a Division Chief Tony Allred. I'm over fire prevention, and that makes me also the city fire code official. With me is Assistant Chief Robert Stafford over our CRR division. We're primarily taking the lead on this on the fire department side. The fire department doesn't get to participate in this process very much, so you'll kind of be gentle with us because we've never been here before.
Okay, we will open up for clarifying questions before public comment.
I have a few questions. I wonder if all of the properties that are highlighted in yellow, if all of those property owners were notified of this meeting?
They were. So we actually sent out two notices. We sent out one back when the 45-day public engagement process started that included this hearing date. We did have an issue with some of those mailings, so we mailed a second notice for those that didn't get it for this meeting. So everybody did receive a notice for this public hearing.
Okay. And then my other question is, do you anticipate that this map will change? The properties that are subject to these rules will change in a decade or something like that?
Yeah, push it again. Yeah, we've been through about 3 or 4 iterations of the map. This project, as Director said, was the product is kind of spurred by a bill, HB 48, that passed the legislature last year, the Wildland Urban Interface Modifications. It directs how we develop our map somewhat. And then when you look at the mapping, for a wildland urban interface definition, a lot of the parcels that are attached, that designation is kind of weighed a lot by what type of property it abuts. So especially on, for instance, those inland properties, it was a really good question. The future development or mitigation or changing of the character of those properties they abut could either make them more dangerous or disqualify them from needing that. So this is communities that we're looking at that have done this in the past, that are already doing it, are constantly kind of reevaluating our map, and we've done a lot of evaluation and included and discluded many properties along the way before coming to this. So yeah, this is gonna be a process that the fire department manages and constantly reevaluates those properties.
And then is the process for changing the map and notifying homeowners or property owners, is that like spelled out in code? Is that a usual thing that you know how to do?
Yeah, so it would be very similar to what we did with this first round. So if we add properties, we definitely will go back through a 45-day notice period, public hearing, et cetera. It might be a little bit different if we're removing properties where they no longer have to abide by the wildland building code, because we're actually removing regulations from them instead of adding them, so.
Okay, thank you.
I'd like to add one thing to the kind of what you're alluding to as well. Part of that 45-day period is a lot of public outreach for us. And so through a couple of our divisions in the department, we hit 11 community council meetings as well as the Greater Avenues Fair to do a lot of public education, not only about the exact parcels that are on the overlay, but the overarching kind of goal of adopting the code and then our overall wildland kind of approach as well. So we're definitely trying to do everything that we can, website, social media, those types of things to alert those residents, and especially the ones that could be affected by the overlay.
Thank you. And then one more question is that these maps are all like the north and the east side of the city limits, kind of? Was the entire, but I'm assuming the entire city was considered, the west reaches of it, south, clear up?
Yeah, like I said, there's probably at least 3 major iterations of this. We started with a lot of properties. Right now, this map represents 917 parcels. The previous version was a little over 1,700 parcels, and then the version before that was well over. We start from using the state's risk maps and then start getting a closer eye on these properties, trying to achieve exactly the resiliency and protection benefits that we want. For instance, at one time, a lot of the west side properties that butted, way out west, but we were able to evaluate those from the building types allowed in those zones and the fine fuels rather than heavier fuels that are on the west side. And then we also removed the Jordan River Parkway and some of those parcels abutted at one time in a version of the map. We were able to get in there and do some real fuels evaluations and determined that those could be disqualified.
Thank you.
So just a question then, in the future when further residential or commercial development kind of creeps into these yellow areas, there's going to be some extra baggage in terms of the fire retardant roofs, the separation of vegetation, how near to the home, all of those kinds of things will be added to these areas as they grow into these yellow areas. I take it. Is that correct?
Yeah, correct. New structures in these areas would need to be compliant with the current adopted version of the building of the wildland code. It's important to note that we are anticipating adopting the most current version of the wildland urban interface code at the next legislative session. It just passed the Code Commission, so we'll be looking at the 24 code. The code that's in statute now is actually the 06 code. So yeah, as new structures go into these areas, the only things exempted in the current code are 120 square foot accessory buildings could be built on a parcel, but any new structures would be, would have to comply with the code. Roofs are a big element of that.
Right. Thank you.
Well, I have a couple of questions. The first one is just trying to understand. So a bill passed. We've got to pass an ordinance by the 1st of next year or something that references the 2006 WUI. Mm-hmm. Where, because we're going to be hearing from the public and they're going to have issues and concerns, where did the city have discretion in terms of implementation of this? I mean, clearly the maps themselves, but in other areas, was there discretion? And help us understand what that was so that we can know. I mean, per the state law, you got to do this thing. And the question then becomes, did you do it the right way? And how did you use your discretion?
I think just to rephrase, are you kind of asking what would be the consequence of not adopting
No, it's
in the
not that.
current way? I
It's-
mean,
I
that's,
think we have to adopt something per the
Yeah.
state law. The question is, what discretion did you have on the implementation? Where you made decisions that were not essentially foisted upon you by the state legislature? Where did you use your discretion? And because that's presumably all we can really.
yeah. No, that's a great question. Thanks for the clarification. It was incumbent upon the municipality to develop the map. We start that process. The bill does say we need to coordinate with State Forestry, Fire and Lands in developing that map. And so that's when we take their original mapping data set and then start kind of everything that was high risk or above in their data set was eligible to be included. We would have been coordinating if we grabbed all those parcels, but then we started taking a finer look at those parcel by parcel. And so what we ended with is many fewer parcels that are in what would be eligible for us to look at. We did start looking at all those parcels. For instance, that Jordan River Parkway parcels that we looked at, those are all, in red on the state map. And so we had to get down and look at those a lot closer. So we did have quite a bit of discretion on the map. What we think we came up with was something that was those properties that qualified pretty directly with the definitions from Forestry, Fire and Lands, and an organization of the map that still gave us that resiliency that we're looking for the city. And that is specifically to give us defensible positions in the event of a wildfire event so that we're keeping those fires in our interface from becoming home-to-home conflagration fires, which is a much different problem for our fire department to deal with.
So primarily the maps. I mean,
Maps is good, yeah. And then on the backside, once we adopt the map, the actual application of the inspection process, the compliance process and stuff, that all falls within our discretion. And we're looking, we've learned a lot through this process. Park City navigates this very well, has for some time, and Boise, Colorado Springs are some other examples. So, moving forward about timelines for enforcement on certain projects, if something's identified on your parcel as a needed improvement or repair, what is the right timeline that it's not burdensome but still provides that benefit for public safety? Those things are all within discretion of the fire department and the city, and we'll continue to move forward.
Almost on a case-by-case basis. I mean, I saw in some of your responses to the public, 30 days to 2 years is
Correct.
but it not necessarily a limit of 2 years. It seemed like.
Yeah, there's nothing in the code specifically that puts a maximum time for an improvement. Obviously, you look at kind of that nexus between how immediate of a hazard is the project on that parcel and how big of a job it is. And we try to work forward. We navigate this through my office all the time, through other fire code enforcements. My office does, whether it be in buildings or businesses. I think the objective is that a needed non-compliant parcel moves towards compliance, not necessarily that end date of, it needs to be done.
And then my last question, which I think you've led into a little bit, talking about the compliance. There were a handful of public comments that talked about annual fees, and I didn't see anything about that in an ordinance or in the WUI or anything. I mean, there's this notion that some people in the public seem to have that they're going to have to essentially, that these 900 and whatever properties will have to bear the cost of the compliance. Will you explain that to me?
Yeah, that's a great question, and we've run into this in lots of public interactions. As I said, a lot of this came from HB 48, and HB 48 is a much larger bill than just cities. You need to adopt the building code. There's an additional layer of programming both from the state and that is mandated to be applied by the county. So in that bill, the state does another layer within the municipality of triage evaluations for properties that is not specific to what's on the map. Our map isn't determining which properties the state will come in and triage. The state will use their own mapping data and their own process to decide which parcels in our city become eligible for that triaging, and then the county will collect a fee on those parcels annually to have those properties continually triaged as extreme, high, or very high. But that's a process that is with the state. Now, I think if you are in our yellow area, since we're using a lot of the same data set to determine, it's probably intuitive that there will be some lineup between their map and our map, but but that fee that is identified in HB 48 is not for any of our process, the city process. That's to facilitate the state's
So that's
evaluation.
not under our purview here.
Correct.
Okay, that's helpful. Great. That's all I have.
You touched on it, but I wanted to be clear. So, because I had assumed it would be between the WI 2021 and 24 that would be, but you're saying that it's the 2006 one that will be adopted, and then presumably they will sync up with the general code cycle and update to 24 when the rest of the ICC codes do?
Correct. That's assuming that the state legislature moves forward with the Code Commission's recommendation to consider and adopt the 24. Right now, we're operating off the 06.
Okay.
And then, yeah, it'll be the 24. All signs point to that.
Okay. And then the other thing, I did my best to wrap my head around the WI. The only mention it makes in there about sprinkler systems is saying like that there will be for, I think, class 1 ignition areas or something along those lines, but it doesn't say anything about what type of sprinkler systems. I'm just wondering if for residential homes, those will be like 13R, or if it's saying that those would need full.
Typically, they've been 13R. They've amended out the interior. If you look at the state amended version of the 2006, the state at that time made a very big point of amending out residential sprinklers as a requirement. They can be added in an alternative means and methods scenario to make up for some other deficiency, a way to achieve that performance if they can't. But quite frankly, in what we're seeing in Utah is that exterior sprinklers are not a great solution in our environment. And so there's some good reasoning for why those are excluded. I would say the same things that were amended out of the 2006, the big hitters, are probably is what's going to be amended out of the 24 or any future code.
Okay. And then the last thing, you said how I assume it'll go through the same process other codes do, and Utah then often modifies the kind of base. Do you know, I mean, is that something we'll just have to see when we get it, or do you know of any big changes that we're making from the kind of base code that, just so I can understand what's being applied?
From the discussions in the process considering the 24 code so far, I think there's some things we can anticipate. We can't anticipate them all. Just as you said, the legislature will do what they do with that code when it's before them. I think you can anticipate sprinkler requirements being amended out. I think some fences to a certain height, just like are in the current version. Basically, it takes away any restrictions on the type of fence you can build as long as it's under 6 feet high. They'll probably bring in a better vegetation list to give you more options. I think they were talking about Utah State has a better list than what's in the WUI code for our area. Give homeowners some other options in those defensible space zones. Those are the kind of highlights I can think of. But yeah, like you said, we'll just have to kind of react to what the state adopts.
Okay, thank you.
All right, if there's no more clarifying questions, then we will open up the public hearing. We will start with cards, and then others may be given a chance to speak. Starting with Scott Rosenbusch. You'll be back here at the back podium. You will have 2 minutes to speak each, and I will time you.
Thank you for that warning. And that makes me adjust my comments substantially. The ordinance has...
Sorry, one more time. Will you speak your name into the record?
My apologies again. Scott Rosenbusch, 1027 North Terrace Hills Drive, Salt Lake City, and I am one of the properties noted on the map. The map creates a target on the backs of us property owners who are identified. And I don't mean necessarily targeted by the city, but it identifies us in a way that I think is not a good thing. You may be very aware that insurance companies have been raising rates over the last couple of years, and many of my neighbors have actually been canceled by their homeowners insurance policy. One of my sincerest concerns is that this program and the identity of properties, be they commercial or residential, may have a significantly negative effect on being able to either obtain or afford homeowners insurance. With that in mind, two things. Number one, there is a definition in section 202 of the ordinance that talks about an insurance services office. It is not discussed anywhere else in the ordinance. There is no discussion of who it is, how it will work. If there is no detail in the ordinance, I suggest you strike this definition of an insurance services office. Second, I request that you specifically add language that prevents insurance companies from discriminating against the mapped properties if they are in compliance with the ordinance. Now, we understand the insurance market is a free market, but we don't want them to go hog wild. If we are in compliance with the ordinance, we don't want them to discriminate against us either in terms of availability or price. Couple of other things, and I will not.
Thank you. That's time.
Thank you very much.
Next up, we will have Rebecca Davis. You will have 2 minutes to speak. And please speak your name into the record when you get there.
My name is Rebecca Davis, and I live at 1564 East Blaine Avenue in Salt Lake. My house is across the street from Blaine Preserve, so we're on the map. I have some questions and some comments. Blaine Preserve is supposed to be maintained by the city. The city is doing a very poor job of maintaining it. Will that maintenance increase under this new ordinance? Neighbors currently are using their weed eaters to cut down the weeds in the preserve. And then can you explain the fee that will be assessed by the county and added to our property taxes? I'm wondering what the fee schedule is, if there is one, and then if our property ends up being removed from the WUI map, will it still be assessed the fee? And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we will have Rick Thornton.
Thank you. My name is Rick Thornton. I reside at 2040 Layer Drive, which backs onto Immigration Creek. We're very appreciative of Chief Allred. He came up, toured properties along there. The challenge we have is, will this map, as modified right now, make it past the State Forestry Division? We're just concerned because the map is supposed to be in consultation between the city, fire, and also the state, and we would just be concerned if they come in there and change it and make our properties subject to the ordinance. It's good for this commission to be aware, people along these creek corridors, Red Butte, Immigration, City Creek, have invested thousands, tens of thousands of dollars in landscaping, plantings, things like that, many of which might not satisfy the non-fire resistant vegetative growth. So this is a big issue for those who live along the creek corridors. Kudos to the chief for carving those out. We just want to make sure they last and the state doesn't come back and modify that. Otherwise, very good questions. I appreciate the property owners would be given notices if the map is changed, as the question was posed by the council. That's the only question I've got. Thanks.
Next, we will have Stan Holmes.
Thank you. Good evening. Stan Holmes, 846 Northeast Capitol Boulevard, and my home is in one of the parcels. My family takes steps annually on our property to mitigate wildfire spread and damage. So I support the proposed WUI code change, but I have some questions. What could be the potential impacts of the WUI map on the affected residents' ability to get and keep home insurance? Is the Salt Lake City WUI map part of the WUI map being used by the Utah Insurance Department? Is the city WUI map synced with the maps that insurance companies are using to approve or deny home insurance? Is the city monitoring home insurance cancellations across the WUI parcels? Some companies are already dropping coverage. I know of a couple already, Progressive, Bear River Mutual. But the state insurance company, or the state insurance department won't tell us which ones. They say it's proprietary. Can the city tell us which companies are bailing out of coverage? Utah currently has no home insurance backup program, unlike the 32 other states that have such programs, like FAIR. Will city officials work with the legislature to get a state backup insurance plan for city residents who are dropped? And then lastly, we know that increased heat, drought, and wildfires are being caused in large part by climate change and global warming, and that it is being fueled in part by Rocky Mountain Power's Utah coal plants, which are set to keep running until and through 2040. The city should try harder to push RMP away from coal, and I appreciate you giving me this time.
Thank you. Now we will hear from Hale Kremel. Sorry about if I butchered your last name. I think I did it right. But.
Thank you. I've sometimes been referred to as Hell Criminal, so it's pretty close. I'm Hal Criminal. Thanks for the opportunity to speak. I live at Blaine Avenue, which is right across from it's on Immigration Creek, right across from the Blaine Avenue Preserve. I was at the Sugar House City Council meeting, the Sugar House Planning Council meeting last week or the week before. I just wanted to say thanks for Chief Allred for coming, gave us a very thorough talk and answered a ton of questions. I appreciate the city taking this initiative. I had a friend out of state whose house burned down as a result of a fast-moving wildfire, so I think it's definitely something that needs to happen, that we need to be having this conversation. I have questions similar to those that have been asked. Number one, of course, insurance. Number two, the Blaine Ave maintenance. I mean, there's a lot of brush in there, and that if someone could go in there and cut out that dead brush, I'm glad to do it myself, actually, but it's not, I don't think it's legal for me to do that. My other concern is just, I forget who said, but we've invested, most of us, a lot in landscaping. I love the street where I live because of all the trees and the shade, and I'm just afraid or concerned about that I would have to, really take either a chainsaw or a brush saw to a lot of the vegetation that's planted, not just trees, but shrubs that provide privacy from the neighbors. So those are things that I would like to make sure that are considered if this ordinance, if that's what it's called, gets implemented. I think that's it. Thank you.
That's the last card I have up here. You're welcome to go up to the podium and speak. I'm going to have this lady in front first, and then sir in the back, you can go next.
Hi, thank you for having this meeting as well, because I think it's definitely needed to control the power risk. or the fire risk.
Sorry, will you state your name for the record?
Vicki Sipple.
Thank you.
I'm at 1905 Browning Avenue, and it's about 1900 East and 1400 South. So I have the culvert way down low in my backyard that goes underneath 1900 East and over to the other side where the church and I think it's Utah Power and Light property is. The only problem I haven't done a lot of landscaping down there, but I've got riparian trees that have grown up. I've had difficulty getting Utah Power and Light to come out and really deal with them. One has a kind of a thin trunk that's laying against the big fat power line. They were going to put a sheath on it, they told me last January, and do some other things. I've got other stuff growing up against the lines too. I was wondering if there's any mechanism that's going to be provided to help those of us, you know, with riparian trees down below, they're not on my property, to get more action from the power company. That's really it for now. So I don't feel like my property is pretty clear. I had to take out a number of trees when I moved in about 5 years ago that looked like they were going to fall on my property or another property. So I'm not quite sure why I'm included, except that the riparian trees along there. I don't know if you can provide any information on that, and I'd love to have the fire department come out and I can show them what I've got going out there too.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Yeah. Hello, Ian McCubbin, 555 Northmont Avenue. I want to acknowledge Chief Allred, Salt Lake City Fire. They're doing a fantastic job. I've been working this issue. I've owned my house for a decade. I work in Pasadena. 300 of my colleagues lost their homes in the Eaton Canyon fire. I really take this seriously. I know that Salt Lake City Fire does. I do not think public lands or public utilities by the Salt Lake City government has any responsibility or awareness of what they do. And I've been fighting with them for 7 years, trying to work with them. The city needs to understand the risk that they have. And Salt Lake City public utilities and public lands are asleep at the wheel, and what happened in Mill Creek is a direct responsibility of Salt Lake City public utilities. They completely screwed that whole thing up and allowed that apartment building to burn to the ground, and it's offensive because Jesse Stewart's been ignoring this risk for years, and this WUI code needs to acknowledge that all this property here is along Salt Lake City-owned property. I understand that the WUI code applies to my house. I have a defensible space around my house. I've been the crazy guy sitting here for 7 years saying the city needs to address it. The other biggest problem is Rocky Mountain Power. If you look at the major urban conflagration fires across the western United States, it's been caused by power lines. Rocky Mountain Power controls the state legislation. They're owned by Berkshire Hathaway. They're a for-profit company, and they just roll over everybody in the city. The entire power line project that was put in as a wildfire mitigation project last year was baloney. That was a voltage increase. They should have buried the lines from the cemetery to K. Rees Park under 11th Avenue. Again, public utilities, public lands, put the priorities of Rocky Mountain Power's profit before the city's homeowners and lied to us. This is an atrocious travesty of justice. The city is asleep at the wheel on this.
Thank you, that's time.
Take a breath. I'm trying to get back to my calmness, I guess. My name is Clara Michael. I live on the map. My address is 625 North Perry's Hollow Road. My home was built in 79, and the way that the hill is managed, and it drops from the back of my house about 5 feet past our house. It drops down, and the landscaping that we did not understand the danger of is junipers. And it holds the hill, and it's around the west side of our house, and the gully kind of swoops in between the two of us, my next lower neighbor, junipers. So I've tried to send an email, but to the email address on the notice, but it's not, doesn't take emails. But my questions were, we don't understand how to start with this. Whatever the degree of hill, it's got to be at least, is it 60% that's a steep hill? It's a very steep hill down to the gully of Perry's Hollow. So is there a place in the city that I call for help with structural land management? Because we don't want our house to go with the yews or the junipers as they're taken out, which I assume, because since I looked them up last week, they're high fire damage or danger because they have lots of, what do you call it? The fire sap and so forth. And second of all, what do you plant? So what I'm wondering about is needing very specific, and I think we need sounds like either the fire department or the city to tell us who to call so we know what plan to make and help finding a contractor. The other thing that panicked me, but I now understand that the city has to make the decision by January 1st. I don't have to change our landscaping. But it's very scary.
That's time.
And
Thank
we're
you.
very supportive of these changes. I just want to add that.
Are there any other public comments?
Hi, my name is Christine Miller. I live at 1979 Wasatch Drive. I'm always hesitant because I'm going to cry about this. I love plants. I wouldn't even have bought this house if I knew that this was going to happen. I've lived there 15 years after I got divorced. I still haven't paid off the house. I do want to retire sometime. I feel like I need to sell the house now because I cannot cut down all the work I've done. It's like my children. I haven't done anything inside the house. It's outside. That's who I am. So behind my house, there's another road. In front of my house, there's a road, Scenic Drive, and evidently there's a big water main that the city has wild grass on. That's not my property. That's probably why I'm in that map. They do not do anything to mitigate that. It's too steep for me to mitigate that. My yard is under control. I spent $20,000 when I heard, because I do try to attend things. This was my postcard that I found out about my house being on this. I put $20,000 into getting gravel when one of my neighbors had a way to get into their backyard to put 30 feet of gravel into no plantings. But now everything else in my yard is still going to be subject to people telling me I have to take out my filbert bush or whatever it is. Anyway, it just breaks my heart. I would definitely have tried everything I can. I believe in wildflower. I want to help. But now I'm worried about my taxes. Now I'm scared about insurance.
Hi, my name is Pam Lekomsky, and I represent 50 homeowners who live top of F Street called North Point Estates. And we have, with the fire marshal, he visits us twice a year with my property manager and goes through 13 acres with 50 homes that sit on this. And we skirt City Creek Canyon. There's some confusion in our community about this map, and I'm guessing the state map, maybe. Some of us are high risk, but then some of us aren't on the other map. So a little confused about that. I think from my perspective, I'm getting more confused instead of less confused. Last year, our insurance canceled us in November, gone after, this property was built in the 80s. So there's a lot of infrastructure, a lot of pine trees that sit up there. And so the fire marshal has walked twice a year with us to say, that goes, that goes, that goes. I think we want to participate and do our part. The concerns I'm hearing from my community is because we were canceled last year on fire insurance, we were able to find it, and that worked out okay, but it was a really scary process to think that you have 50 homes that might not be insured. We're okay at this moment on that, but we're really scared, as the gentleman earlier said, to be sort of put out there and told everybody knows we're on the edge, so we feel vulnerable, I guess, about our insurance and costs raising, et cetera. And then I apologize, but I am really
Thank you. That's
confused
time.
about the fee.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name's Tiger Rohr. I'm the Deputy State Fire Management Officer with Forestry Fire and State Lands. And I came here tonight to hear some of these concerns. I would like to make a few clarifications on the difference between the WUI code that the city's looking at versus what the state and our division's doing. So the WUI code is from 2006. And it's up to the municipalities and the counties to decide where that applies, hence the mapping. That is the big WUI. That's low to extreme risk, or whatever the municipality chooses to apply the WUI code to. The fee, the high-risk WUI boundary that you've heard about that is getting conflated with this WUI code is something that we're working on. And I encourage you to look up House Bill 48. It can help you with some of your questions in itself. But we're looking at the very highest risk wildland-urban interface. And that's going to be based on risk modeling that includes the wildfire risk that you would typically think about, which is like direct flame impingement, heat to structures from surrounding wildland vegetation, and also the ember load that comes from these wildfires that goes well inside the perimeter where you would normally think the wildland and the urban meet. And then we're applying a structure density standard to that as well, because that's where, as the chief mentioned, that's where we become involved in much bigger problems where we have urban configurations, and that's where our primary risk is. The fee is associated with those places identified in that high risk map that our division will be coming out with. And that fee has yet to be set. So it's right now we're in the rulemaking process, and those rules are being drafted. We've gotten comment. We're working on additional drafts. We've gotten comments on fees. I know there's a lot of concerns about that. The last thing I will say is the insurance piece. Right now, the insurance companies use whatever they want. They use whatever risk models they want, plus their actuarial models. We have no control over that. House Bill 48 has no control over that. If you read the insurance requirements in House Bill 48, it basically comes down to what we identify as high risk with the division is what they've got to use as high risk. It doesn't say how they use it, it doesn't say rates have to be keyed to it, or even whether they insure someone or not. But there are some provisions within that high risk area that the Public Insurance Commission is involved with. If they do raise rates in those areas, more than 20% or drop or discontinue coverage, they've got to provide the homeowners the reasons why. Now, it is our hope and legislature's hope that this whole bill helps address the homeowner insurance issues being dropped. So the part of it where we'll be actively involved in doing law assessments, and hopefully our partners, to triage, basically give homeowners ideas what they need to do to lower their individual risk. we're hoping the insurance companies pay attention to that and adjust their rates and their coverage accordingly. So this provides a path, but it's not a requirement by the bill to tell the insurance companies what they can or cannot do. So I'll be around afterwards. I know it probably went over my time. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Anyone who hasn't already spoken that would like to have 2 minutes to speak? Okay, we will close the public comment period. So from now on, it's time for the commission to discuss the issues, and we may ask questions of staff or the fire department, but we ask that you be a silent participant in that discussion. Okay, so opening up the conversation to, sorry, I would like to give 5 minutes. You can maybe have a little more to kind of discuss some of the things that you may have heard in the public comment period. Some things that I heard were concerns about insurance, which we got covered a little bit, so I'll leave that to your discussion. Fee schedule, again, we heard a little bit about that. Is this map being coordinated with the state was one of the questions that was brought up. Concerns about how residents will go about understanding what bushes and trees need to be removed, concerns about hills and plants on hills and structural stability. So those were some of the main, and then also what will the city do to reduce the risk on city-owned land was another concern. And I saw you writing some notes as well. So I will now turn the time over to you to address any concerns that you might have heard. Sorry, at this point, we just have Thank you for bringing it up. At this point, we are just having commission and the fire department respond. Your comment about the Pirelands will be considered now, I'm sure. So yeah, please, if you have any thoughts.
Yeah, thanks. I think I took notes on those same questions. I know it is very difficult to kind of parse out the discussion of insurance impacts, the state county leveled fee, and their mapping system from this project. I just want to throw out again an invitation. My email and office number populated in both the staff report and the agenda here, I believe. And so I want to just invite anybody that spoke today to reach out directly to me. I'll be in starting next Monday. But just to, and I think we got some clarity on those issues. The public property abutting these properties, I think, is a consistent issue. I've heard it at all of our discussions. Not mandated by this ordinance, but correlating I should point out that the mayor's office has directed the fire department to engage with every one of the city property owner, all the divisions that manage city property across the Wasatch Front. We've been mandated to start our own triaging and priorities and mitigation identification throughout those properties. So Chief Stafford can probably
speak to that a little bit more. So part of the process of this whole, not only adopting the code officially, but with the Salt Lake City Fire's wildfire kind of initiative, if you will, the last couple of years, but really spinning it up this year more so, is an assessment of all city properties including other departments, obviously other than ours. And so part of that was a mayor's kind of mandate, but something that we've been slowly but surely doing with some of the departments that within the city that have property like public lands, public utilities, golf, CRA, those types of things. So we were in that process of doing an assessment. Now the difference is this year, fire department and specifically emergency management within fire department is kind of taking the lead on that. So we're working directly with those departments. There's a working group right now and a committee to do an assessment of all these properties. That's in the mix right now. Then they're going to prioritize these things and then come up with a plan on the mitigation. And the mitigation tactics and the standards we're going to hold are the same standards that we would give to the public. I actually brought some clarification on that. We also have a lot of this on our website. So we're going through some of the projects that are already currently starting over the summer, are some things in Allen Park, Miller Park's right around the corner, City Creek Canyon, as well as the Jordan River Parkway. So, and that's a combination of some third-party vendors that are coming in through grant funding, the fire department directly, public lands, and then in some cases public utilities. So, so yeah, we're certainly addressing as best as we can with the resources that we have to address some of those city properties, but we fully realize there's a lot of work to be done on those regards. So.
Yeah, and I think some of the other questions I had was exactly trying to understand and it's not clear if you haven't dealt with the WUI code a lot, exactly the impacts on the vegetation types, allowables and stuff. I think one thing I've gotten through public impact is the focus of WUI landscaping requirements on a parcel are not necessarily to impact large mature trees. There's some advice on pruning those, but those aren't necessarily your number one ladder fuels that get into structures. It addresses some of the lower types of planting, and there's a lot allowable. And the distance in the code for how far you need that sort of managed space between moving out from your home sort of depends on how you first categorize your property. So that relates to both the construction of your home, where it sits on a hillside, what the property around it is like. They'll come in and say it might be 30 feet. I heard 30 feet on one of the properties. So it might only be you need to manage 30 feet from your structure on a parcel. Depending on how the parcel sits in the neighborhood, it could be up to 50 or even 100, although our parcels don't tend to be that deep. So we do have it on our website, home assessment option. Fire department will come out to your home now and do an assessment, like I call it kind of the WUI code light home assessment. But it does give you kind of an idea of those types of things that are going to be identified in a more formal WUI code evaluation right now, because they're all based on a lot of the same industry standards. So I encourage people to go to our website and sign up for one of those and have a crew come out and take a look at your house and give you some recommendations now.
Yeah, and a lot of our public outreach, we have heard some misconceptions on the assumptions maybe of what they're going to need to do, and sometimes I think people are pleasantly surprised by maybe what they can kind of get away with essentially on their property, depending on the structure, the roof material, the siding, and then their defensible space, their landscaping. So again, we've done a lot of public outreach in person, but a great one-stop shop is, I also encourage folks to read House Bill 48, kind of dive into the code a little bit if they're really interested and if they're labeled as one of those properties, but also our website. If you just Google Salt Lake City Fire, it's probably the first one, but slc.gov/fire/wildland, you can see all the maps that we have, firework restrictions, evacuation zones, this map, as well as signing up for defensible space assessment. That's a free service. We've been offering that for the last year, and now those are going to spin up, as you can imagine, as well as some of the nuances of, there's a whole Ready, Set, Go guide. It's a 12-page document, goes into the weeds on 0 to 5 feet from your home, 5 to 30 feet from your home, 30 to 100. These are all standards, kind of national standards. NFPA, which is the National Fire Protection Association, NFPA 1144. These aren't things we're making up. We're just using national standards for those, what those kind of implications are going to be. So, and then as Chief Allred mentioned, in the next code, there'll be a little bit more descriptive on some of those vegetation types and those types of things. So good resources to kind of answer some of these questions as well.
Great.
Is there anything other specifically you wanted me to touch on? I know there's a lot.
I think that seems pretty good to me.
Okay.
All right, now we will open the discussion to commissioners. And at this time, we'll just ask that you speak if you're asked a question, but don't jump in unless you're directly asked something. Okay, so jumping to commissioners, are there any thoughts or recommendations that commissioners are thinking?
I can start this. I'm very empathetic to homeowners that live close to these areas. Prior to relocating here some 27 years ago, my wife and I lived in the Angeles forest, and we understand all of these problems. And even back then in California, there were only 2 insurance companies. That was it. So I'm wondering if there might be some kind of program that if homeowners are doing everything that's asked of them with the landscaping, with the fire retardant materials and things, if there's some kind of certification or letter or document from the fire department that says, yes, this owner has done all of, everything that we've asked them to do, so that there's some kind of wherewithal when those homeowners then try to apply for insurance. Now, I know you can't control insurance. I know the other fire marshal said that, but it feels like if there's something that the homeowner has in hand, that is documented from the fire, from the city, that they've done what they're supposed to do, that might help.
Yeah, I think that's a thing that we can ask fire to consider, but as far as like a code thing we can enforce, I don't think that's something that the commission has a purview over. But
Understood.
I completely hear your comment and understand that could be beneficial, and that's a thing that you might consider. Any other comments from commissioners?
A lot of these neighbors are neighbors of mine, live in my neighborhood, which is a beautiful neighborhood, which we all enjoy because we are close to the mountains, because deer walk down and turkeys live there and all that kind of stuff. So we've been lucky to live by open space and by trees and all of that kind of stuff for decades and not suffered a big wildfire that wiped out a lot of homes that I know of. But those videos of those neighborhoods getting wiped out and kids stuck in, school buses that can't get out of the fire are so scary. And it feels like with the benefit of living on open space, there's also a risk associated with that. And if your house needs to make some changes to its landscaping, I understand that can be expensive and can be like, what now? This wasn't part of my plan. So I hope but it seems like the point is to make our neighborhood safer. And I hope that's what ends up happening. So your house is safer. If a fire is there, your house will live through it, and then your neighbor's house, and then your neighbor's house. I also think that it seems like the maps of what properties were included were thoughtful, and they made an effort to include the most accurate information, hopefully, and not just try to put as many houses as possible on it or take as many houses as possible off of it, and made a decision based on what would be safest. And I really, you can see that Anthony Allred's contact information is up there if you want to write it down. And I would take him up on the offer for the fire department to come to your house and give you a little light review. We did that in our community council one time, where they came to a neighbor's house that's not on this map, but they had a really kind of scary backyard, and the neighbors all came together and chopped trees down and stuff like that. And I think it was a good exercise, but I would definitely take them up on that offer. And then hopefully that big wildfire video, just this whole side of the town going up in flames doesn't happen here. I hope it doesn't. And we're required to do this, this change. And I think that the things that are the city's choice have been thoughtful, and I hope it works out. I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that your yards are still beautiful, there's still deer coming in, and your house doesn't burn down.
I'm going to agree with Commissioner Burrows and just sort of take a step back and, I think a lot of the comments, it's hard to not be sympathetic to all of the concerns that we've heard. They all sounded very real to me, and they're concerns that I would have if I were a homeowner in this area. But most of these types of comments, I think, would have been, better made before the legislative, committee this winter. They're the ones who've decided that municipalities of a certain type and size, or with a certain amount of exposure to these areas, have to adopt this 2006, which will become the 2024. That substantive decision is already been made, and so a lot of these concerns, while I sympathize with them, it's not really our purview to weigh a lot of this stuff. The legislature seems to be doing this a lot lately, where they give a timeline that is pretty, the city did a good job with outreach, public outreach, and it took 3/4 of the year, and now here we are. And if we don't approve this or recommend the approval of this, then the city's in a real bind.
All right, I will, if there are no more comments from the commissioners, then I would be looking for a recommendation.
Can I ask a real quick question? Is there any precedents for any other cities in Salt Lake County that have adopted this map or that are required to, or is Salt Lake City the first or the only, or?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Previously, it was optional for municipalities and mandatory for counties. So the county has had WUI maps and adopted this for unincorporated areas for some time. I don't know the exact year. Other cities along the Wasatch Front that we've kind of looked at their programs are Sandy City has adopted previously, Draper City has adopted previously. You can kind of imagine when you look at some of their foothill growth why. Park City has been adopted and managing a WUI system for the WUI code for some time, probably one of the older ones. I pointed that for some other homeowners that I interacted with, that if you're used to driving around Park City and seeing some of those what appear to be heavily wooded lots, the vast majority of lots in Park City are WUI code compliant. So you can see, I get that there's a kind of a notion out there that being WUI code compliant means losing all my trees and things like that. So I encourage you that it's not exactly like that. So yeah, we've been working with the fire marshal up there, the state, their administrator, Sherry Wellman, for a lot of as we start to look at rules development and checklists. So yeah, there is precedent around here for it.
If there are already municipalities, if Draper and Sandy already have this rule, don't we know what their fee is per property owner?
Well, we haven't set a fee, and like I said, the fee that I think has been discussed is that property evaluation fee that's coming from the state for that triage property
That
evaluation.
part's brand new?
That's all brand new. Municipalities, per the code, are able to set fees for whatever permitting they do, and that would be a policy decision as to if we decide that a fee of some sort for the WUI permitting or implementation of the code is necessary, then that would go through the regular fees process by the city. Right now, there is not one identified.
I thought I read, though, that the county can assess a fee for all the municipalities inside of it, all the homeowners that are on their map?
The state is mandating the fee and per HB 48, and the county is tasked by that bill to assess that fee. But that fee does not go to any of what my office would be doing as far as managing compliance with the WUI code. It's a separate process. That fee is designed, I believe, I'm speaking for the state a little bit, to cover the cost of doing those state level evaluations when they come up with their mapping.
So the Draper residents and homeowners, they have had these rules up till now, they just haven't had this other fee. That's the new part?
That'll be new to Draper and even the cities that have previously adopted the WUI code, correct?
Okay, thanks. I'll make a motion if you want to wait for a second.
Great.
Based on the information presented in this discussion, I move that the commission recommends that the city council adopt this request.
Second.
All right, we have a motion and a second, and we will start the vote. Commissioner Leverett.
Yes.
Commissioner Barrett.
Yes.
Commissioner Vela.
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows.
Yes.
Commissioner Scott.
Yes.
And then I will vote yes, and that passes unanimously. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate you guys. And thank you to everyone who came to comment on that topic. We appreciate your voices.
What's in?
Okay, so now we are going to move on to our next agenda item. I'll probably give a minute in case people want to leave the room before the next agenda item. Thank you.
Don't ask me to do cursive, okay?
All right, so we're gonna move on to the next agenda item, which is a text amendment dealing with right-of-ways. We'll start the presentation.
Cool. Good evening. Thanks for having me. My name is Ben. This text amendment is on section 1452. It deals with the disposition of city-owned rights-of-way. For some background, Planning Commission initiated this in February of this year to modify section 1452. The intent is to include all city-owned rights-of-way. We'll get into that in a minute. And to update the policies that must be met or considered when a request for a vacation or closure comes. Staff recommends that the Planning Commission forward a positive recommendation to City Council. Right now, we have 4 consideration factors when requesting a vacation or closure. Code says that you have to meet one for the city to consider it, but the council and commission, they can determine how much they weigh those factors. Those 4 factors are lack of use, public safety, urban design, and community purpose. Proposed is 7 factors, 4 new ones. We're keeping 3. We are getting rid of the urban design factor. The 4 factors we're introducing are impact on general plan, impact on property, public utilities, and size factors. Impact on general plan, this one deals with looking at all of the city plans, permits, things like that, and evaluating the proposal of a closure to ensure that connectivity is not potentially impacted negatively. Impact to property, this is to ensure that if you own a property that's abutting an alley that's requested to be closed, we want to make sure that you still have access to your property. That could be off of another street. We just don't want somebody to end up with a landlocked property. Public Utilities is going to look at each request to make sure that they have adequate access for maintenance and installation, emergency access to their utilities, and also that if they need those rights of way for future utility installations that they have in the plans or in the works, They got to ensure that they still have access. If the request would potentially impact access, they are open to agreements that are recorded at the county. So legally binding agreements that state that they still have access. And then size factors, it's to almost, is it big enough for a car to drive down? If the size of the right-of-way is not necessary to provide safe and reasonable access, that's what that is going to look at. We are also modifying the lack of use factor of consideration. I know this has been a hot topic on Planning Commission lately with a couple of the alley requests we've had. And so we've modified this lack of use factor to exclude illegally built structures unless they have been built prior to the year 2000. So if somebody built a shed 5 years ago into their alley and they came in and said, hey, we want to close this alley because nobody uses it. Well, you built this. This doesn't count anymore or wouldn't count under this code. But if it had been built in 1980, it would, and they can prove that it's been there since 1980, then it would count. Some things that wouldn't count would be gates and fences at the edge of the alley. That's clearly there to prevent access to the alley.
Is that a blanket? Is that even past 2000 that the gates don't count?
The way it's written out, correct. Okay. Method of disposition, currently there are 3 methods. We're keeping those 3 methods. We are adding 2 new methods, exchange of land and simple closure for public or private purposes. Exchange of land is really up to the city council if they deem that the applicant has offered some land that they own and the city council says this land we're interested in for a public purpose, for a public benefit, whether that's a park or whatever it may be. So that's up to the city council. And then simple closure of public or private purpose, that could be for a park or a community garden or something like that. One of the current methods is being modified. So right now, if you're abutting low-density residential, it's just split evenly down the middle with some caveats. But we don't specify what low-density residential is. And so we're just clarifying in this proposed code that for this purpose, low-density residential is 25 units per acre or less according to the applicable future land use map. As mentioned in the introduction, streets and other rights of way, they are not included in 1452. In 99, City Council adopted 4 standards for streets, for street closures and vacations. It was never formally codified into city code. So recently, these requests have been processed similar to alleys in 1452. So we're just including language that includes streets, other rights of way that the city owns will be explicitly detailed in 1452. They'll still follow the same process as alleys, but so like this picture on the right, this was a recent request. And that area between that little cinder block wall and the sidewalk, that's city-owned property, and it didn't have a formal way to request that vacation, and so now it does. We are also modifying public hearing requirements. Currently, all vacations and closure requests need to have a public hearing with you, the Planning Commission. We have written into the proposed code that if no city department or the general public have any objections or concerns during the 45-day public noticing period, they can be exempt from the Planning Commission hearing. Their objections do have to be rooted in policy that's laid out in 1452. It can't just be a general, we don't like alley vacations because we don't like giving up land. So instead of a recommendation from Planning Commission, City Council would get a recommendation from the Planning Director. Our recommendation, again, is to forward a positive recommendation to City Council. That's all I have for you.
Great, thank you. I would like to hold clarifying questions and directly open the public hearing on this topic. Is there anyone who would like to speak? I will close the public hearing on this topic and now open it up to the commission for discussion.
I'm sorry, can you go back 2 slides? Yes, on this one here. So, and I understand City Council will receive recommendations from the planning director instead of the planning commission. I get that.
Mm-hmm.
Will the property owner have a recourse to object or to modify? How does that process work?
Right now, we do not have it written for the property owner or applicant to object or modify, but I would imagine that if no city departments have objections or concerns, we would have a recommendation of approval. But also we, as the planning department, we could be the department that objects, and so then we could bring it to you.
So the property owner would be notified, this is what the planning commission is looking at doing?
Yes.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
My question is, can public utilities say no? Do you guys ever say no to an alley vacation before it comes to us? Does that ever happen?
Public utilities can say no. Frequently, engineering objects. I've not seen us object. Nick, do you know?
Yeah, we have objected to them before, and sometimes the applicants decide not to proceed based on that level of objection and the reasons why. Other times, they do choose to proceed. So it's been a while, but the one that jumps to mind is we had one that was parallel to Highland Drive that came through a few years before we did the utility and rebuild of Highland Drive through Sugar House. And we recommended no on that. Told them that not just, it was planning, transportation, public utilities, and engineering all were recommending no on it. They decided to proceed. The planning commission at the time recommended no, and the city council denied it. So yeah, it's possible that'll happen.
And when you say the city engineer often says no, but would you count the cases where they've said no in the past and you guys are like, but they just always say no? Like, would that count as a reason for it to come to planning commission?
So we have it written that their objections in the proposed code, their objections would have to be tied to standards in the code, like the factors, consideration factors.
But it's you guys who decide if their opposition counts, is tied to a standard or not. So I wonder if in the past few where the city said, we never say yes to these, if those would have counted for you, if just that item would have counted as a reason for us to hear it.
If there's a question, we're likely to bring it to the commission. If it's clear cut and there's like, oh, we just don't like it. We think it might be needed in the future, even though there's no identified future city plans for along that street or something like that. Then we might be like, hey, if we don't have any plans that require that, is it a real objection, or are you just objecting because you don't know what might come 10 or 20 or 30 years down the road? So we're more than likely going to defer to the planning commission to make that call.
And how much of a delay does it make if it has to come to planning commission? Because our agendas aren't so full that you can't get in for the next few months.
Yeah, it's mostly just the noticing, being able to prepare that staff report and the noticing, and that can take several weeks. I mean, there's a minimum notice, right? So it's probably about a month.
Are you preparing a staff report on on everything? Like stuff that you can approve, things that are within your discretion to approve? Are you preparing a staff report?
No, so if we're approving something at the staff level, we prepare a document that's called like a findings in order approval letter, where we're listing what those reasons for the approval are. So we don't get into the analysis and things like that. And generally that's because those things are fairly straightforward. So like somebody comes in to modify a design standard by, they want to reduce the minimum like glass requirement on the first floor from 20% to 18%. We'll look at why and be like, okay, good. If that meets standards and we're okay with it and there's a justifiable reason, we'll just approve it and say it's been reduced because of this kind of thing. But we don't do a full multi-page staff report.
Okay. I wonder if the choice of the year 2000 for if you're, does that include fences or gates that someone puts at the edge of if they were there in the year 1999, would that count as lack of use? If somebody put up a fence or a gate?
Right now, that section of code is written to where fences and gates would not count regardless of when they were built.
And that would continue, that language would be in the rules going forward?
Yes.
Yes, okay. So I know if your car is 25 years old, you can get an antique license plate on it, but it seems like an illegal garage at 25 years is not really that old. So I wonder if choosing the year 2000 is appropriate, or if there was like a general, at the time there was a reason why 2000 is chosen, because they did a lot of aerial photography, and so like maps of the whole city are available or something like that.
Nick, are you able to speak to that? Why 2000?
I guess not really. I think there is some arbitrary nature in that, but I think part of the reason why is that what we're looking at are oftentimes these are structures that don't require permits, even though they may have been regulated by zoning. So for example, up until 2008, I think it was, like fences didn't require permits. And so people could just build fences. There were still fence regulations, it's just you didn't have to get a permit. And then like some accessory buildings under, I think it's 200 square feet, don't require building permits. And so people can build those. They still have to comply with zoning. And so we get the kind of this gray area where people build something where we don't require a building permit under the building code, but there's some expectation that they know, or they're going to at least ask what the applicable zoning codes are, which we know doesn't always happen. And so I think I think we try to add a date to create some fundamental fairness to that, so that we're not going back and something that's been there for a long time, and we went with decades, that we're at least acknowledging it's been there some time. The likelihood of us enforcing the removal of that is probably pretty low.
Thank you.
I was going to say, if you use the phrase grandfather, then it's probably better to use a date that we can't remember, like when I was a kid, maybe something older.
Yeah, our code throughout has the date of, I think it's April 15th, 1995, because that's when the last comprehensive zoning code was updated. So that's also an option to put in there. We have that in our code multiple times.
Is there a worry that if it's 95 versus 2000, regardless of that year, I was thinking if someone built something illegally and there was a complaint from a neighbor, but they never really took legal action, could their complaint, or could like a lodged written complaint or something be used to rebut the grandfather presumption?
Yeah, it probably could.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
How about so right now they have to meet one of these four consideration factors. Then they have to meet all 4 of these next 4, like the whole alley has to be. So will those last qualities, those will still be required in the going forward, or those are kind of deleted? Like the preference to delete an entire alley, it won't leave a property without access to a public street, like that kind of stuff. All that stuff still stays?
I believe that is still in the code. One of the things is impact to property. We don't want to deprive anybody of access to their property. I don't know off the top of my head if the preference is kept into the code to vacate a full alley instead of a partial alley. I can get you an answer.
I'm checking.
Thank you.
And then it seems kind of hard to pin down to say that an alley vacation doesn't have to meet one of these 7 requirements now. It could be approved without meeting one of those 7 requirements. That seems a little wishy-washy.
Well, the reality is the final decision to close an alley and vacate it is at the discretion of the city council anyway.
Yeah.
And so they don't actually need them to find 1 or 2 or 3 or any number of them. That's why they're called factors and not standards. And they also, including the commission, has the ability to, on a consider the specifics around each request and weigh those factors appropriately. Because sometimes some of those factors won't even be present, right? They won't apply, but others may be more important. For example, if you're in the downtown area and there's an alley that is identified in the downtown plan as being a mid-block walkway, that can take precedent over all the other factors, and you can make that finding. So you have discretion on that.
It is still in the proposed ordinance that it is. Sorry, I misspoke. Yeah.
I think I'm ready for making a motion.
Okay.
Based on the information presented in the discussion, I move that the commission forward a recommendation to adopt this text amendment to the city council.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Can I propose an amendment
Certainly.
to change the date from 2000 to April 15th, 1995?
I would certainly accept that.
Thanks.
Just for a correction, it's April 12th.
April 12th, 1995. Thank you.
Okay, let's vote. Commissioner Scott,
Yes.
Commissioner Burrows,
Yes.
Commissioner Vela,
Yes.
Commissioner Barrett,
Yes.
Commissioner Leverett,
Yes.
Commissioner Krasik. Yes.
Great. Thanks, y'all.
Thanks.
All right, and that concludes the agenda. So we will move on. Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, all right.
The new rule
Good
said
job.
we're not supposed to clap. We're
You're supposed to clap.
Unscathed, no point of order.
In France with the Army Nurse Corps, and in 1922 became the first nurse hired by the new Prime